To tea or not to tea? That is the question of the day. Hello everyone, I'm Candice Moll and I'm here to bring you some Australian accent tips, some ideas to help you make your Australian dialect sound more authentic. So a question that I've been asked quite a lot, often in the comments on these videos too, is how do Australians pronounce the letter T? There are four main ways that I can think of that an Australian person might pronounce the letter T. So I'm going to take you through those and then also mention a couple of exceptions to the rule in the hope that it will help you rather than confuse you. So the first way to pronounce the letter T is, of course, the hard T, which is the T that everyone can hear. T. Usually comes at the beginning of a word, to, today, tomorrow. If you can hear that T, it's a hard T. I want to touch on the placement of the hard T, specifically for people who have English as their second language. Often what will happen in different languages is that the placement touches the back of the teeth. In Australian English, we don't want to do that. So if you feel the back of your teeth with the tip of your tongue, slide it back a little bit and you can feel that ridge there that's behind your teeth. The tip of your tongue wants to be at the very tip of that ridge. It's right here. T, t, t. So my tongue isn't touching the back of my teeth. It's just a little further back on the top of that little ridge there. Okay, so that'll help you to get a really clean T sound rather than having a heavier T, T when it's touching the back of your teeth. All right, so the hard T will be used, like I said, at the beginning of a word. It will also be used in more of a cultivated dialect. That is what pronouncing every T will create, that cultivated sound. The next way to pronounce a letter T is the silent T. Now, this generally will come at the end of a word. For example, the word what, rather than saying what, which will be more of a cultivated sound, which is also Australian and still correct. If you want more of a general sound, then we would make that a silent T. To create that silent T sound, don't stop the sound in your throat. You want to place your tongue on that ridge, right here, and close off the sound with a placement. So instead of saying what, I would say what. What. I mentioned in an earlier video that if you stop the sound in your throat, it does create more of a British sound. So make sure you're placing your tongue right there. Okay? So some examples would be what, right, art. Art's a really hard word for me to say. No one understands me if I pronounce it the way that I want to pronounce it, which is just art. It sounds like I'm just making a noise. Art. Art. Another example of that is heart. But there you have it, the silent T. So the next way to pronounce a letter T, which is the soft D sound. Now, this generally will come if the T is in the middle of a word. For example, water. And the way to create this sound, it's more like if you imagine in other languages, maybe like Spanish, there's a lot of rolled R's, right? So think of the name Rogelio. It's a name I saw on TV and I like it. Rogelio. That R sound is basically what your tongue is doing when you create an Australian soft D sound. So an exaggerated way to say it would be like water, water, but instead of allowing that R to be long, you just want your tongue to roll over once. Water, water, water. So it's so soft that it's almost like a rolled R. But just that one rotation, okay? Water. Other words might be butter or bitter. Anything where there's a T in the middle of the word will probably have that soft D sound. And again, if someone says water or butter, then that's still correct. Often people will use both. So they might say water 1 minute and then say water the next. I often notice, like with these videos, I might use more hard T sounds in these videos than I would in my day-to-day life, just because I'm teaching. So I try to speak more clearly, and then I watch it back, and because we're talking about the letter T, I'm thinking about it as I'm speaking. It's interesting. I'm trying to be more clear, so I'm using more T's than I might otherwise. So that's the soft D sound. Now, the other time that a soft D will come into play is if you have a word that has a silent T at the end, but you're using it in a sentence. So for example, the word heart, but if I put the word heart in a run-on sentence, then I would say, my heart is beating. My heart is. And this really is the same rule as the connecting R. Remember in an earlier video, we spoke about that R that comes between two vowel sounds? This is a very similar thing. My heart is beating. Okay? So that silent T becomes a soft D sound in that instance. And it's really just about making the flow of the speech smoother. It's all about being lazy, really. Just be more lazy and you'll sound really Australian. The last main way to pronounce a letter T is what I like to call a chewy T. Now, I'm pretty sure this is not a technical term. There's a good chance I made it up. There's also a chance that I heard it somewhere and just started using it. I don't actually know where I got it from, but I like to call these a chewy T. And the reason is because these T's make a ch sound, like in chewy. So this generally is if a T is followed by an R. For example, the word truck, truck, It's like you're making that sound, chur, and you're pulling your tongue back into that sound, truck. So my tongue starts on that ridge behind my teeth, but it's like I'm pulling it back into that R so quickly that it just makes a truck, okay? Another example is the word tree, and even the word Tuesday, Tuesday. That's a real chewy T. There's no R there. It's just a straight Tuesday. Okay? Now, the other time that a chewy T will come into play is if you have a T in the middle of a word that is followed by an ER. For example, the word literally. Now, you read it and you want to say literally, which is how the Americans would say it, literally. It's a very popular word at the moment, literally. Often used completely incorrectly, but that's for another day. So the word literally, what we're doing is we're taking that TER in the middle and just dropping the E all together. So it becomes a literally. Okay? The same rule applies for interesting. It's not interesting, it's interesting. So you just drop that vowel in between the T and the R. Another one is, battery. Instead of saying battery, which I've been known to do from time to time because I live in the United States and I pick up habits. My dad picked me up on that one. He's like, I think you mean battery. And I'm like, oh right, it's not a battery, it's a battery. Good call, Dad. Thank you very much for keeping my Australian dialect authentic. So, they are the main ways that I can think of that an Australian might pronounce the letter T. Now, I want to touch on a couple of exceptions to the rules because there's always exceptions to the rule, isn't there? Just to make life interesting. So one of the exceptions that I want to talk about is looking at the silent T. I said they usually come at the end of a word. That's true. However, the letter T will often be affected by whatever letters are surrounding it. So if you look at words where the T has either an S, an X, or an F that comes before it, then generally you're gonna pronounce that hard T at the end of the word. For example, the word test. So because the T has an S before it, then you're gonna say the hard T at the end, test. Another word is next. It's got that X in there, and craft. Just pronounce that hard T if it follows an S, an X, or an F. There's probably other ones as well, but that's what I could think of. Okay, just to make it confusing for you. And the other exception that I wanted to talk about was if a middle T is followed by an EN. This rule of dropping a vowel also applies here the same way it does in literally, where you drop the E between the T and the R. If you look at the word kitten, we're dropping that E between the T and the N at the end of the word, kitten. The way to pronounce this is to use a silent T in the middle. So kit, use that placement the same way that you would the silent T, kit, and then just make an N noise without moving your mouth. It comes through your nose, really. It's a bit like a Japanese kid saying yes. They're very cute. Kitten, kitten. Again, really lazy, kitten. You place your tongue, use it as a silent T, and just make a sound. Same with batten or cotton. So anything that ends in a ten, a ton, a tan, the general rule is that you drop that vowel sound and just use the N. A really tricky one is the word important. Important. Now, important makes sense based on what I've just said. But that T at the end, it can be silent, but generally there's the smallest sound there. It's like you place your tongue for the T, important, and just release it. Place the tongue and release, and it makes that little popping sound. Important. Okay, important. So that's sometimes going to happen if a word ends in NT. Okay? Just to give you something to practice, because we all need those. So there is your letter T. I hope I've helped you. Keep on practicing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.